My friend Joel actually said this at Overkill. He said, if I won the lotto, I'd probably just buy more machine, get more in debt, and just start. And I'm like, dude, I would do the same thing because like I don't want to just sit in the beach on Hawaii. Like that doesn't sound appealing to me at all. I want to go get machines. I want to start building more stuff, and that's just it. So.
Welcome to the HPA Tune-In podcast. I'm Andre, your host, and in this episode, we're joined by Matthew Bernasconi from M26 Engineering. And Matthew's actually no stranger to the podcast. We had him on around about 2 years ago, but at that point, he had just made the bold jump, moving from his existing job at Kibbetech, where he was working as a 3D modeling and CAD specialist, to starting his own business, M26 Engineering. And we thought it was time that we caught up with Matthew and find out a little bit more about how exactly that journey has gone. There's a lot that goes into starting a business, no matter what industry you're in, but in the automotive industry, you find a lot of people who start a business because they're exceptionally good at a particular task. In Matthew's case, of course, 3D modeling and CAD. But of course, running a successful business takes a lot more than just being good at that particular skill. So I was really interested to touch base again with Matthew and find out what that journey's been like, what the unknown hurdles that he's come across in that 2 years have been, and how he's enjoying the ride. Before we jump into our chat, for those who are new to the Tune In podcast, High Performance Academy is an online training school. We specialize in teaching people how to build performance engines, how to tune EFI, how to construct wiring harnesses. We also cover topics on fabrication, 3D modeling and CAD, race driver education, and data logging, just to name a few. You can find all of our courses at hpacademy.com/courses. All of these courses are delivered in high definition video modules that you can watch from anywhere in the world, provided you've got an internet connection. This means you can learn from the comfort of your own place and you can learn at your own pace. All of our courses also come with a 60-day no questions asked money back guarantee. So if you purchase them for any reason at all, decide it wasn't quite what you expected, no problem, let us know. We'll give you a full refund. And for podcast listeners, you can also use the coupon code podcast75. That will get you $75 off the purchase of your very first HPA course. We'll put the coupon code in the show notes to make it nice and easy for you to find. Lastly, if you like free stuff, then I've got a great deal for you. We are constantly partnering with some of the biggest names in the aftermarket performance industry to give away some great prizes. You can always find our latest prize at hpacademy.com/giveaway. It might be an aftermarket ECU or dash. It could be some engine components or engine building tools, or just about anything in between. They are great prizes, and we will ship them free of charge to your door if you're the winner. There's no tricks here, no purchase required to get your name into the draw. All right, enough with our introduction. Let's get into our interview now. All right, thanks for joining us again, Matt. For those who maybe want your whole backstory, they can check out the original podcast, which we've linked to in the show notes. But I think rather than rehashing everything, let's still start by getting maybe a quick overview of who you are, what you do. So give us that.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. Yeah, my name is Matthew Bernasconi. I do a lot of design, machining. My background is pretty much, I would say, product development is one of my strongest points, is something I've pretty much used my whole entire life or done my whole life. But machining background, been doing it since I was 18. And CAD design I've been doing since I was in high school, sophomore in high school. So pretty much that's my whole life. It's behind a computer, designing stuff on the computer, CAD design mostly. I did dive into a little bit of computer graphics stuff, a little bit of photography. Yeah, but mostly I love machining. I love designing. And that's pretty much all I do day in and day out to this day.
And I mean, that's exactly how we found you in the first place. We'll talk about your Instagram account a little bit later on, but scrolling through your posts, you've got a knack of designing these parts that not only function, obviously that's the most important part, but they look amazing. So, anyone who's interested in 3D modeling and CAD, definitely you deserve a follow for sure. Okay, so when we spoke last, you were working at Kibbetech, and could you give us a quick, sort of a high-level sort of overview of what parts you were designing and what your role was at Kibbetech?
Yeah, so Kibbetech was a company that I went into with the role of bringing products into the business, kind of a departure from what they were doing at the time, which was mostly fabrication. They were doing a lot of fabrication. Some of the stuff that they were machining, they were subbing out, and even their CAD design. They had guys kind of coming and going doing CAD design, and so they had a few guys that were there a little bit longer, but for the most part, he was getting CAD people to kind of fill in and get his vision on the computer, and he had a lot of ideas, so he had to get the right people there to kind of do that. So he had a number of CAD guys there developing, and so even when I got there was a lot of CAD stuff in place. In the beginning days when I got there, it was like either updating pre-existing drawings or taking them a little bit further. And as time evolved, it became one of those things where we had really good communication and we started creating more things that he had visions of creating in the future, not limited to the product line. That was a way of helping him bring a little bit more, obviously, cash flow with product line. You are able to actually control and see trends. You can see sales. It's kind of like an e-commerce thing, whereas in fabrication is a little bit more based off of your customers and what customers you're going to bring in long-term projects, so you don't get that trickle effect. So I had gone in there for like product development, and then as time went on, we were doing really good with CAD, so we started kind of teeing off and not only doing some of the more exotic machining, but also implementing a lot of the design process for manufacturing of their trucks and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not super uncommon. So before that job, I had actually been doing product development for over a decade, and then I went into aerospace programming before I went to Kibbetech. So I had been doing it pretty much my whole life. I'd bought a lot of machines for different companies. I had set up machines, I had programmed, I had design, everything from design, machining, to advertising, to packaging. I had done basically since I was in my early 20s. So when I got there, I mean, he definitely saw what I could do immediately, and Ryan's like an amazing orchestrator too, because part of running a successful business too is finding the right people for the job, and he gave me the opportunity at the time to come in. He saw what I could do. He saw how he could implement that in his company, and he ran with it. So he made everything happen, and it was a super fun journey, without a doubt, like my funnest job I've ever had to date, for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm interested, like what you've talked about there with your experience at Kibbetech. It sounds like you and Ryan were able to work really closely together, and it sounds from what you've just said that you were able to make your own suggestions of where you saw a direction for the business, and he was able to take that on board and run with it. I would think that that would be relatively rare. I think a lot of business owners, you employ a staff member, you sort of pigeonhole them into a role as you envisage it, and there's no flexibility there. Have you found that that's been the case in your past work, and Kibbetech was a bit more open to sort of trying different things?
Kind of. So it's very common. Yeah, that's common where somebody will get somebody that has a certain trade or skill. They put them in a position, and everybody has their position and they stay, and that's how the whole body works, right? I've always kind of been an oddball, even when I try not to get too involved with too many things. I think I don't know if it's accidentally or subconsciously, I always seem to find a way to put myself in a position where it's a little different for me. Everywhere I've ever worked has been a little different. I've worked in extremely corporate environments where it's, aerospace, government jobs, 20 plus employees, and, structured, whole nine yards. And there's exceptions for me, as odd as that sounds, because I would say I'm pretty much a problem solver when it comes to things. I'm a person that kind of just driven on my own. And so I work really hard. I think it shows, but I also need very little direction because I'm a big problem solver. And so every job I've ever had, I've seen what you're talking about, where let's say the opportunity or the door of opportunity is closed, right? And so they just want you to stay in one spot. They want you to do your job. You go home with your paycheck. But I think a lot of it does have to do with the amount of work that you put into the business. So if you position yourself as a person to kind of just go into a job with like the thought process of, this is what I get paid for, this is what I'm going to do. I don't get paid for this, I don't get paid for that. I think that's a very poor mentality, and I've never had that mentality. Whenever I go there, it doesn't matter what I'm doing it all at the maximum potential that I can. I'm there for the overtime. I'm there for the business. I get involved with the business. I enjoy the business. I like the growth of business. And I think all of that stems from very young childhood, always wanting to have my own business. So I would see how a business works and then kind of say like, okay, how could this be better? And so it's always been wherever I work and whatever I'm doing, how can we get the most out of that? And so because of that, I think that puts me in a very unusual position because a lot of people don't like to do that.
No. Yeah, I think you'd clearly be the exception to the norm there. And I've run several businesses, employed a lot of people, and normally people kind of want to turn up, eat their lunch, pick up their paycheck, and leave not a second after 5 o'clock or whatever knockoff time is.
Yeah, right. And when you work with people too, you can kind of spot the people that are a little more willing to do stuff for the company, the people that are a little less willing to do. And it's not right or wrong. I mean, it depends on every individual's journey, right? So like if you're at a position or a job that you don't want to be at, you're going to be doing the minimum, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That might be the stepping stone to going to an actual job or waiting for an actual job that you really want. And so, that just kind of comes and goes. But overall, like if you are interested in the business, like let's say you're interested in the company and what it's doing, regardless of pay or regardless of anything, I think it's super important to get involved with the company and see like, okay, how does this whole body work? And then for me, I've always thought, how could I implement this in the future for my own company? And I think we were going to talk about a little bit how, why I kind of want to start my own company. That's been a long-term dream of mine.
Yeah, it sounds from what you've said, it's pretty clear that you've had that in the back of your mind right from the get-go, which I think is probably also rare. You're obviously not the normal case study here, but that's got you to where you are. Just coming back one step, though, I think when it comes down to sort of employee mentality, you sort of mention it really. There's no right or wrong, and I mean a lot of businesses just need that sort of workhorse employee that turns up, does the job to a good standard and goes home, doesn't make any fuss, doesn't try and change the way the business is running. And for a lot of businesses, that's exactly what they need. I think that also probably goes for larger sort of more corporate jobs. You're probably not going to change the direction single-handedly as an employee of a large corporation. However, in smaller sort of owner-operator businesses, I think that's where working closely with the founder, the owner, and when you sort of show that you are above average intelligence, you've got an amazing work ethic, and you can make suggestions that can really work well for the both of you. I think when you're in the role of that sort of owner-operator, sometimes you sort of end up with your blinkers on and you don't see opportunities or problems that are glaringly obvious to someone coming in from the outside. So, that's sort of something that's worth considering as well, worth mentioning as well.
I do also think based off that note, like whether you're that person that wants to be involved with the company or a person by passing that's going through the company to eventually get to where they're at. And then also the company where they're looking for a person that wants, like, let's say call it a number, right? And a company that wants like an innovator, right? There's two spectrums on both sides, right? And occasionally they'll meet each other and they'll be a good fit, right? But there's no right or wrong. And companies, they sometimes, with the way companies run, sometimes it's really easy to get caught up on the schedule and what you got to do to make the week end. And then you start to miss what the employees need to be happy and satisfied and be taken care of, right? And we all have our own things that we have going on, whether it's at home or in the company. And it's very easy to get caught up with like just day in and day out and then kind of just reflect on, okay, is everybody actually happy here, right? And it can go both ways too. But I think that there's 100% a place for somebody to show up, do the work, be happy, go home with a paycheck, go home to their family because, people have kids, people have wives, they get married, they want to do honeymoons and stuff like that. So all of that is 100% fair. And then there's some people that are in different stage in their life where they're wanting to really make an impact, or maybe they want to climb that ladder a little bit or get more involved. And that's okay too. I think there is a place for everybody for sure in all spectrums, and that's okay. All of it's okay, really. And I definitely don't think it's an intelligence thing. I think it's more along the lines of just where you are in your position in life. I don't think like you say intelligence, but I don't think I'm any smarter than anybody else by any means whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I've met a lot of people that are way smarter than me. So
Yeah, that's probably a fair point, actually. I think it's more a work ethic and drive. Maybe drive is probably the point. And I think also, like, without trying to sort of flog this one to death, I think a lot of the way an employee will work in a position is going to come down to how passionate they are about that position. So I don't have statistics on this, but I'd estimate probably 75, maybe 80% of people are kind of stuck in a job that they're probably not very passionate about, but it pays the bills. And that's just a means to an end. It's probably pretty hard to get really amped up about, all right, let's see how we can make an improvement today. Whereas, when you're working in an industry that you are passionate about, it's your love and your hobby, that's a whole different ballgame, I think.
Yeah, it is, and the passion definitely gets you through the harder days. But even me, like, I can't say that I was consistent every day, 365, right? I'm a human, I have flaws, so like, there's definitely days where like I reflect back, looking now, and I'm like, man, I could have done better on some of those days, right? And so, yeah, I'm definitely with flaws too. So I don't think that I definitely have some drive behind what I do when I put my head to something. Like I don't sleep until it's done but I do have my days of procrastination, which is super common too. So
That is great to hear, and I think that goes for absolutely everyone. So for those listening who maybe are suffering from a bit of that, maybe don't beat yourself up too badly. I'm interested with, obviously, Kibbetech's not your first job. You've already mentioned sort of a bit of your work history, but is there sort of anything that you learned through that position? What did you take on board? Was there sort of any mentoring going on that you then ended up applying to your own business?
yeah, I've taken things from all of my jobs for sure, all of them, including kibbies that I didn't have on the previous jobs. And I think, starting a company, especially with the short amount of time I've had this company and the leaps that I've taken with this company, all of that wouldn't be possible had I not been at the three other businesses that I worked at and learned from those companies, whether it's how the company is ran, how their financial state is, some of the burdens that go along with it, from start to finish. So there's a lot of things I picked up. I would say the things I picked up from Kibbetech, other than being able to support yourself through creativity, I think that's one of the companies that speaks the loudest for that, because you could actually make really cool stuff. And if you like it, then that means there's probably somebody else out there that likes it. And I would say the last thing is like confidence, like the confidence that I needed to actually do this. I think that's one of the things that Kibbetech actually brought to my plate that other companies didn't, was just the confidence to actually go out there and do this. Because like the other companies I worked for, they were great in their own respects, but like you were saying, they're a little more corporate, or maybe even wanted you to stay in your lane a little bit more, kind of like how you had just said. But I think with seeing how the company was ran and how everything just kind of comes to fruition so fast and quickly with designs, and I think the social media, getting involved with social media, and Ryan helped with that as well. He allowed me to start my social media and showcase his products. That was pivotal in me having a company today. I would say, yeah, mostly the confidence to go ahead and do what I needed to do to just start my journey as a business owner.
Okay. Clearly, you've already mentioned that owning your own business had been a long-term goal. How did you decide when the time was right? I mean, obviously, there's a big kind of leap of faith here, going from a known paycheck that you're going to be picking up every week to the great unknown, and obviously a huge amount of cash burn somewhere in between. So, yeah, how did you decide when that time was right?
Yeah, definitely. I know for sure this answer. So the truth is, I knew the time was right when I realized there's no such thing as the right time. And that's pretty much the truth. I've been trying to start this company for past a decade. I've been trying to do my own thing for over a decade. It's been in my head day and night, every day when I get home from work, every single part of my life. I've always wanted my own company. And I've put together plans and plans and plans to do this. And I'm like 30, I'm going to be 39 in like 6 days, actually. But you start to see time slipping away. And then it becomes one of those things where after 10 or 15 years of having this vision and this dream, and it's not coming to fruition, then you're like, okay, does it really exist? Does the perfect time or the planning actually exist? And the answer is basically no, because there's always something, right? There's always either you lose your home, or you lose a job, or you have to burn your money because you got flat tires. You never know. There's always something going on. Those things are never going to change. They're always going to be there. So you need to stop waiting, and you just start to realize, like, okay, regardless of what happens, you have to just take action. And I remember I had a coworker, super motivated. I said we're very similar in a lot of different ways. He ended up getting fired, and it's not the reason, all that doesn't matter. But I remember when he got fired, I was jealous. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was smart. He's a super smart guy. He's a super driven guy. He's super motivated. He had a lot of traits that I did. And when he got fired, I was like, he's on his way to start his journey. That's what I saw.
That was the push that he needed to make the decision.
Yeah. And I was like, that's the push. And for me, I felt like he got the easy way out, because I had to find a way to quit. And that's hard, because it's self-inflicting pain, right? If you get fired, it's almost like somebody just stabbing you, right? But when you're going to quit and you don't have like the means to survive, then it's like self-inflicting pain. So it's much harder to quit with a vision, with no plan really in place, than it is to just say, oh man, I just got fired. I better figure things out tonight. I'm not sleeping until I have everything in order. You have this hard push to actually get going and do it. And I'm not that person to just say that. Just, what, I'm like every other person. You say you're gonna do it, and then you go home after long days of work and you say, I'll do it tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow never comes.
And it never comes. Or you get close sometimes, but then it slips away, because you don't have that push. You don't have that full day or week with like a ticking time bomb, right? And when you're at that position where it's basically, let's call it life or death, or the drive to survive, right? You don't have a choice. You have to do it. And so, yeah, when he got fired, I was jealous. And I was like, man, why couldn't that have been me? Well, it's because I show up and do everything that I'm supposed to. So that's on me. But yeah.
So what happened? I mean, you've said that over a decade you've had the plan to start this business. So what was different at the time that you actually did commit and jump ship and do it?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question, because you're right. You've been planning to do this, and you try and you fail, whether it's actually following through with the actions in your thought or a plan. A lot of the times I made the excuse that I don't have enough money, right? I never had enough money. I've never really had any money put away, like the American dream. Everybody has like, 30,000 in their bank account just in case, right? Enough to survive for 3 or 4 months. At least that's what they tell you. But I was just like anybody else, right? I had, a few $1,000s in my bank account, maybe like 2,000, 3,000. Like, this is not enough. Just
kind of living paycheck to paycheck like most people.
Yeah, paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, I made more money, but then I spent more money, right? And, you try to find some satisfaction by getting a nicer car or a nicer home, maybe taking a vacation, convincing yourself that you're doing okay. But I think there was a few things. The first thing was I was getting older, and I had a kind of like epiphany when I was 30 years old. And that's how I quit my first job. Was I had basically noticed that I had been at a company for over 12 years. And I was like, oh man, if I don't leave now, I'm screwed. I'll be here for another 10. And I immediately jumped ship. I went into aerospace. That was still very difficult, but that was more of a job change. So it was a little easier to fill, because I had enough skills to go get another job or jump into a different trade. So that was relatively easy, but it was still extremely stressful. So yeah, but with the company thing, it was basically, I was getting a little bit older, so I started getting a little bit of anxiety, that I was like, oh man, if I don't start figuring this out now, this might be it. I might not have this chance. But then I think the thing that really pushed me to get going was Instagram. Instagram, I had so many people basically messaging me, calling me. I had made so many friends, so many contacts, business owners, potential customers, friends, long-term friends even. I was freelancing for a bunch of people. I was making decent money on the side with the freelance work. But all of that stuff from Instagram was basically what said, okay, this is the time. And then I would say that I'm fortunate enough to have kind of a niche part in the social media game where it's not a entertainment thing. It's kind of entertainment, but it's not like an entertaining thing where you have to blow up a car to get attention or something like this, right?
Yeah.
It's more along the lines of engineering and education, and a lot of it has to do with creativity, right? So like you draw something on the computer and it's a nice visual of it, and then you get to see it be made, like buy the material, cut the material, and then see the finished product, and you do that all in like 15 seconds. And so by doing that, a lot of people out there, a lot of guys and girls like that are inspired by building their own cars or trucks or robots or whatever it is, they see the page and they go, oh man, like look at, he had this vision, he did this process, and here it is. Or maybe some people had no idea how that's ever been made, and they see it and they're like, oh, so that's how you do that. And it's such a short time, like 15 seconds isn't very much, but it impacts very good. And the inspiration that it brings to so many people is crazy, and that's one of definitely the best parts of it. But
I think that that's definitely a massive benefit that Instagram has. I mean, it's not all, weird, trendy TikTok dances. There is genuinely the ability for sort of learning, understanding concepts and seeing how things are made that you never really understood. And, that can spark an interest for people and maybe diving into a whole new career.
Yeah, and this particular Instagram page, right? Not only do you get to see that, but companies started noticing the page also, and they were like, "Oh man, this guy can actually do A to Z. We should contact him and see if he can do this project that we have. Whether it's a lower truck or a motorcycle or a boat, it doesn't matter, right? Maybe we should contact him and see if he's able to do this." And so when they would contact me, I would tell them the same thing that I would tell everybody, like, I don't have my own machines. I can do the CAD design. I pay for my own CAD seat, so I'm more than comfortable doing the CAD design, but I can't do the machining. And then that's where I started noticing a little bit of a buffer, because most people wanted me to machine everything. They didn't want to just have the design. They wanted the A to Z thing that they saw on Instagram. And then as time started kind of going, social media started growing a little bit more. And then I started realizing that Instagram started becoming a little bit more, how do you say, like too trendy, or it starts to get, it's saturated, right? It's saturated with similar things, but a lot of things that aren't realistic anymore, like these trips that are infinite, right? Or these AI cars that, people are just making visions like this very fast, and things that are basically not real anymore. And so people started disconnecting from Instagram too. And so that was this is such a far tangent from the original question, but that was the original thought for me to say, oh man, this isn't forever. And I'm at a position right now where I could take advantage of all of these connections and actually do something with it. And if I don't make a move now, there's no guarantee that I'll be here next year or the year after, because Instagram could eventually turn into the next Facebook or like the MySpace thing, right? And so it might not be existing in the next 5 to 10 years.
So better leverage it while you can.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was like, okay, right now is a good position to be in.
I'm guessing as well from what you've just said, this goes further to giving you the confidence that, hey, there's all of these people that are asking for my skills. And if that's just on Instagram, it's kind of going to give you the confidence that if you build it, they will come. I am interested, though, you just mentioned you had these people reaching out who wanted the sort of the A to Z process. However, these days it's perfectly acceptable to do the design work and then outsource the machining to a third party. And obviously that we'll get into this in a bit, but that kind of circumvents a massive financial outlay on CNC machining equipment. I'm interested, was that something that you considered sort of maybe as a soft launch for M26 engineering?
Just doing design?
Yeah, and maybe like working with a CNC machine shop, so you could actually provide the finished parts as well, but you just weren't doing the machining in-house.
Yeah, definitely. When I first started the company, that was the plan, to just do CAD design and then go into machining eventually. And that was very short-lived, because I think my very first job was designing it was like a truck that was doing the hill climb race, and they wanted front suspension for this truck. And they're like, we need you to do all of it, just sub out the CNC work. And it was funny, because it was my first job as a company. I had a bunch of jobs lined up for CAD design. I was working out of my home office. I had talks about getting a shop in place and stuff like this. But then, yeah, that was like the first one where I was like, I started going through the process, doing it on my own 100%. And it's difficult. It's very difficult to navigate the machinist and the CAD design and going back and forth and working around the schedule of a machinist because it's hard. The machinist world is more difficult than it's actually set out to look like. It's like you have to, especially with prototypes. This is all rapid prototyping is what we're designing, right? So it's a one-off front end for this truck, and it's a 5-axis spindle, it's a 3-axis upper, it's a fabricated lower, and all these things have to be connected, and then there's a lot of hardware, there's a lot of spacers that have to be machined, misalignment spacers. So all of that stuff has to be made. And for a machinist, what they see is they see this list of parts, maybe 15 parts that have to be machined, and they see one of everything.
Yeah. There's not a lot of economies of scale going on there, is there?
No. And so it's like program this part, process engineer how they're going to make it, right? They're going to build the fixtures for that one part, and then they're going to go through that whole process. Then they have to copy and paste it, mirror it over, make sure all those strategies are good. And then they have to go through that. They have to spend 4 hours to set up the machine. Hopefully they don't scrap the part, because now there's also the risk that somebody might program incorrectly, or they might set up the machine incorrectly, because it's not just one person, it's two people, right? Programming and setting up, and a company that's trying to make a profit. Now they have this risk that they might lose one, and they can't buy a second one because the material is too expensive. These pieces are massive. So the likelihood that you can mess up is high, and so you got to go a little bit slower, which means it's going to cost more money. And then you look at a job like that and you go, well, this one spindle is going to take me 4 days. And let's just say most machine shops, maybe they need $1,000 a day to be able to make a profit. So now they're looking at $4,000. If everything goes good, they might break even. And now it doesn't seem so appetizing. So now they feel like they're doing you a favor. And they're like, okay, well, we'll do it. It's still going to be like $15,000, but we'll do it. And then it kind of gets put on the back burner because it's rapid prototype. They have production stuff coming in. And so
it's hard to get it turned around in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, so this first job to get it machined, it took over 3 months to get all the parts machined. The first parts I got quoted out to machine, they sat at a machine shop 90 miles east for a month until they told me we can't do it. And then I had to pay, a driver $300 to go from 90 miles east to 90 miles southwest of me, and then just pick up the material and put it over here to this other person that says they can do it. They picked up all the material, moved it over there. They got half the parts done, and they said we can't do the other half. And then I had to have somebody pick that material, take it back to the original machinist, and say, hey, can you do this in a rush, on a weekend? And then, it was like 10 spacers cost me like $1,500. So that was when I was like, oh man, I could have made a profit here had I just had machines, right? And a machine for me is like a payment. And I've seen, like I was mentioning before, I've set up a lot of machines for companies. I can work really fast and really hard. The chances of me scrapping out a part is very low because I've been doing it for 20 years. I know what I need to do. I know where I need to take caution and, slow my speed down.
I guess you've got complete control as well. You're the only person doing it.
Yeah, and then you have to explain that to the customer. And that sucks because he goes, hey, man, it's been 3 months. Like, where are these parts? And then, you're calling the machinist and you're like, hey, what's going on with these parts? And they're like, oh, I'm in Hawaii. I'll call you back in a week when I get back. And you're just like, oh, man, this is horrible. So I didn't want to do that.
Yeah. Ultimately, as well, as far as the customer's concerned, it's really all on you. They're not chasing the machinist. I guess like getting maybe a little bit out of order, but seeing as this has come up, I mean, as devil's advocate, I'd argue the exact same situation goes if you've got your own in-house CNC machine in terms of does it make sense to do one-off jobs as opposed to trying to design parts for production runs?
Yeah, definitely. So in the early days, I looked at it as, well, I can make that part. It's going to suck. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of risk involved, but I'll take that because that's what I can get. And that's basically why I started with rapid prototyping, because I knew that there was this gap where machinists were like, no, we're not going to do this. It's not worth our time. We want RFQs that are 100-piece minimums, 150-piece minimums. And so all machinists are going to deny two parts, two spindles. But for me, I felt that,
Someone's got to do it though.
yeah, somebody has to do the dirty work. So I was like, you know what? I'll do the rapid prototyping. I will do those parts that nobody else will do. I can charge a little bit more of a premium based off of the parts not being made by local machinists, and also a little bit off Instagram, where more people had a desire for me to make the parts because they knew what they looked like, because they had my Instagram, and they had proof, oh, like he can actually make a really nice part and stuff like that. So they were able to pay a little bit more of a premium for these rapid prototype parts. And yeah, I just got them done. I just did whatever it took to get them done. And that's how I basically justified getting the machines. I was like, okay, machines are expensive, yes, but I've done this at least 6 times, where I've put together quotes of machines for companies. I have put together all the tooling that's required for these machines. I know what I need to buy and put it in the position to start making the minimum amount of things to start making these parts. And so I did the numbers on that, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. I could make this work, kind of.
Yeah. Okay. I guess to a degree, there's a bit of sort of overlap here with when I started my tuning business. Dynos are expensive, not as expensive, granted, as a CNC machine, but we were looking at, I think at the time, maybe 150,000 NZD investment, and I mean, I definitely didn't have anything like that. So I was renting a dyno around the corner, and frankly, it was a pain in the ass. I was working on the other shop owner's schedule. I couldn't use the dyno after hours or on weekends. And then there was also every hour I was on that dyno, I was getting charged, and rightly so. But sometimes when you're chasing down a problem that maybe has been self-inflicted, it's very difficult to pass that on to the customer, but I'm still getting charged. And when I finally did bite the bullet and took that leap and bought my own dyno, and we had the monthly repayment was X, and after the first 2 months I looked back and thought, shit, I should have just bought this years ago. It was a no-brainer, but there was that analysis paralysis putting off the decision.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
On that note, when you're looking at CNC machinery like this, I'm assuming you're not just writing a big old check. Is the sort of financing in place for these?
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I went with a new machine and why I went with Haas. So Haas I've used forever. And most of the companies I've worked at have bought new machines from Haas. So I knew of all of the rebates that they could put in place, the tax breaks, the write-offs. I knew about their preventive maintenance programs and how if you damage a machine, they can come out and fix it for free. Labor-wise and transportation, obviously you have to cover parts. So there's a lot of benefits to buying brand new. And the thing is, the machines don't really lose value. So if you buy one used, you don't know the history of it. You don't know if it's damaged or it's maybe not able to be calibrated correctly. You have to pay to get it shipped, which is not cheap. It doesn't matter if you have to go around the corner, it's not cheap. When you buy new, they cover the cost of shipping. You get the tax breaks, you get everything immediately, and then they give you vouchers for tools and coolant and stuff like that. And so when you look at the whole grand scheme of things, yes, you do have a monthly payment, but you don't have to put as much money out up front. And a lot of the charges get covered in the initial buy of that machine. So it's actually way easier, in my opinion. I think it's so much easier than people realize to get a machine. It might actually be just a tad bit harder than buying a car.
Okay. Yeah, it does sound on this basis like they've made it as easy and affordable as they can. At that point, yeah, I guess buying maybe a 10 or 15-year-old machine would probably be hard for that to make sense. I think the part that is always easy to overlook, if you're busy on your CNC, which hopefully you are, downtime, if that machine's out of action for a week or two, that's a huge hit to your workflow and hence then therefore your cash flow. So buying something that's new with a warranty, everything you just mentioned, guaranteed performance for probably a good 5+ years, there's a value that you have to place on that as well.
Yeah, and when you actually go, there's obviously I say it's easy as a car, but it kind of is and kind of isn't. But like as a new business, usually it's a lot easier if you have a business that's been established for 2 years. That's kind of like their quota. So me being like a new business, I had to go through a few extra loops to get these machines. I had to actually write letters of recommendation, letters from potential customers that were going to allocate jobs to me with guarantees I was going to have work. And I had to go have meetings with Haas and show them this information like, hey, show them my face, tell them why I need machines and how I'm going to profit, and all my customers that have signed off and said that they're going to give me work. So there's a little bit more involved as a new business to actually get a hold of these machines, because if you're in business for 2 years, then you have records that you're making profit and you can actually afford the financing. And Haas does in-house financing, which is who I finance the machines from. So it's not like you're going to a third party; they're taking care of everything right there. And I love Haas. Like, I'm not like paid by them at all. They've given me some tools for free because of social media, but a lot of people have given me stuff for free. But I don't actually get paid to say, yeah, go with Haas. The reason Haas is so great, well, for me especially, they're like right down the street. They're about 15 miles from me. So
No, it's got to be pretty helpful.
that's the first part, right? So they're like right around the corner for me. Second of all, I've used their machines. I learned on their machines. Their controllers are very easy to use, and I've been using them for over 20 years. And so the controllers are very natural to me. And then their maintenance and everything else that they do, if your machine is down, I mean, they're out there fixing it, 1 or 2 days. If you call them and you say, hey, I damaged machine, they can say, oh, take us a week to get out there. And you say, look, it's an emergency. I have no way of making my bills unless I get these jobs out. They'll say, let me call you back and see what I can do. And 9 out of 10 times, they'll say, we have a guy on his way. And so they bend over backwards. I've worked with them forever. It's amazing. Now, are they the absolute best machines? No, they're not. Not by any means. But can they get the job done? Absolutely. I've been at shops that have DMG Moris, which is like a German machine. Beautiful machine. Way gorgeous, faster, quieter, stronger, rigid, better in every shape or form. About 50% more the cost of Haas, but poorer customer service in some cases. Now it's changed, I'm sure. I don't want to bad talk any company at all. In my opinion, compared to Haas just does it a little bit faster and a little bit quicker. And it could be that they're easier, the machines are a little easier to work on, so that's another reason.
I guess a lot of that would come down to your familiarity with the product. As you say, you've been using them for 20 years. You know them like the back of your hand. I guess the same goes for tuning software. There's a certain range of ECUs I tune all the time, so I know them inside and out. And when I change to something else, it's not necessarily that it's better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah, you're used to it. Like, I get that question a lot. The most common question I get on social media is, why'd you pick Autodesk Inventor over SolidWorks?
Yeah, well, I think we actually dived into that exact point in our last chat too.
Yeah, and it was like, that's what was given to me, and that's what I learned, and that's what I made work, and now I'm used to it, and now that's it. So familiarity goes a long way for sure.
All right, I'm interested, just to sort of get this back on track a little bit. I'm interested, before you sort of actually committed and started M26, had you sort of written down a formal business plan? And if so, what did that sort of look like?
Yeah, my business plan was probably about a month of work to kind of put everything in place. Obviously, there's a lot of the business side of things that I had no idea what to do. Like, I'd seen the countless YouTube videos of how to get an LLC and the taxes part of it, setting up an S corp, and how do you navigate from your personal financial life to your business financial life, and how not to mix the two together, and how much of a burden that can be. All of that was kind of put in place to kind of put the plan together. I had done a few meetings with potential customers. One of the customers that helped me out a lot in the beginning was like Joel at Overkill Racing out of Utah, Salt Lake, Utah. He's a really good friend of mine. He was one of the guys that definitely helped me motivate myself to say, hey, you can do this, like, you got this. And he originally was like, hey, like, you have a lot of talent. I trust in you. I believe in you. I love you. Like, if you go out and you do this, like, we have enough work to keep you busy just with us alone. And so if you are ever short on work, call us and we'll give you work. And he was like, we'll allocate, 30, 40,000 from now to the end of the year as, a guarantee to give you some work. And that was just mostly CAD design. That's kind of like paraphrasing, because, we had a lot of conversations. I went over there for like 2 or 3 days and kind of just sat with him and kind of got mentored a little bit. But he gave me, like, man, I felt like a new person when I came back home for sure. Because I was like, man, this guy, he has everything figured out. We had an amazing time. Like, we were driving his old C10 truck around town, and, going for like dinners and all this stuff. And, it was a fun time, but it was a huge eye opener to where I was like, I want this. Like, I really want this bad. And then I had other shops like Empire Fabrication, Sean Ramage. Like, he was he was pivotal in getting my business running too. He gave me more than enough work, and also the motivation, and like the companies that really help me out like this, there's a lot of them, and they're just like, without like them saying, like, they were behind my back every step of the way, saying like, look, you got this, you can do this, go ahead and do it, and we'll help you.
Okay. Really important to have that sort of confidence and backing before you make that leap of faith. So at the point we're talking now, I think you've been running this business for maybe a little over 2 years or thereabouts. What's that journey been like? What's the sort of changes that you've made over that 2 years? How has M26 Engineering evolved?
Yeah, so the plan, I guess, my original plan was to get up and running, build up enough capital with Job Shop. And that was basically taking on all those rapid prototype jobs with CAD design and pushing these parts out. The way I saw it, and it doesn't really matter, my machine payments at the time were like $3,500 a month. And the way I saw it was like, if I can't make $3,500 a month payment with all this equipment, then it's not meant for me. But I was like, for me, it made sense. Like, shouldn't be a problem making one or two jobs and then making this payment and all the overhead that's involved with it. So originally the plan was to do Job Shop, build up enough capital to eventually branch off and have my own product line. And the Job Shop was essential because that was the only way I was going to build up enough capital to support a product line. Because in the beginning I had nothing, right? I had two machines. I had my desk that was sitting on 6 milk crates. I had a lawn chair in the lobby with one table where I was doing my scanning, and I had all my CNC tools in milk crates in the back. And I would just push them from this side of the shop to that side of the shop for photos. So I wasn't really, it looked good on photos, but it was just this empty shop with two machines. And pretty much every job I got in, it took profit from every single job. I broke even, and just my benefit was kind of building my toolbox library, let's say, right? Because maybe this job needed a thread mill or something to make a thread. Well, now I have that finally, but it took me that job to do that. So every job I got more tools. And so it was basically just getting the next job in, buy the tools for that. And the whole first year was just like every penny went back to the company. Like, I didn't make anything. Like, it was just like, okay, keep on bringing in the jobs. Let's keep on collecting tools, until I got to the point where I had enough tools to say, okay, now I just need a lot of money to start a product line.
Is that all? Just a lot of money?
Yeah, I just need
Easy.
It's super easy. But once you get the ball rolling, you start to look at the opportunities. Now, it wasn't as like, it definitely wasn't as A to Z as it sounds. Like, obviously, there's a lot of jobs I failed at. I failed at a lot of jobs. As a matter of fact, the first 3 or 4 months, 50% of the jobs I took on, I failed at, meaning I had to refund and replace in some cases. So, I was having to double up on jobs after that to make up for the mistakes I was making in the beginning. Because in the beginning, my thought was, I'll just take in everything that I know I can do, which is CAD design, programming, machining, blueprints, you name it, I'll do it. And then as I started accepting these jobs, and some of them were smaller, some of them were bigger, I started maxing out my bandwidth. And, especially starting the company, I didn't account for the company, like, as far as the paperwork side of it, taking 8 hours a day, like going to the city and getting licenses, and then setting up my taxes, talking to my CPA, meetings with that, because I didn't know anything about business. So I was trusting a lot of people in place to help me with this. And I didn't realize that it was going to take most of my day just doing the business side of thing. I didn't realize how much of a luxury it was to just show up to work to do work.
I think that's the sort of entrepreneurial trap, though. You start a business, and I've talked about this many times, but to reiterate, you start a business because you're good at a thing and you enjoy doing a thing. And then all of a sudden you find that you can only spend, hey, maybe on a good day, 50% of your time doing the thing. And the other 50% is all of the business shit that needs to be done. And I mean, I don't know about you. I'm interested to hear sort of, have you enjoyed the business stuff, or is that kind of a means to an end, just a bit of a chore to get through so you can do the thing that you enjoy?
Yeah, because it's such a fast track. I mean, the first 6 months to a year was not fun. It was so far from fun. My initial ambitions were just overshadowed by just stress and what the heck did I get myself into kind of mentality. It was just so much work. And when you start a company, people look at you as a company, so you get the short end of the stick from everybody. You get the short end of the stick from home, sometimes. Obviously, I have a very supportive family, fortunately. But even when you're absent for long durations of the day, it takes a toll on everybody. But my whole family has been super supportive, fortunately, and I'm super grateful for that. But when you're absent, it sucks. It sucks for your kids, it sucks for your wife, it sucks for everybody. So
I don't think it's possible to start a business without putting in a lot of grind, and that means a lot of hours. So I think at least during the first few years of starting any business, there's no such thing as work-life balance. It is work, work, work.
yeah, the other short end of the stick is you don't have time for yourself anymore. So anything that you used to do for fun or to relax a little bit, that time's absorbed by the company. The next thing is you get broadsided, especially in California, because it's not fun to do business out here. You get broadsided by all sorts of taxes and fees and all sorts of things, and they hit you basically when the timing is wrong, when you have no money or you're having to refund money. They're like, oh, by the way, the county wants $2,000 or something, and you're like, for what? And they're like, just cuts. And if you don't pay, we'll take your stuff. And I'm like, okay, say it nicely. And then the other thing is like when you talk to customers and stuff like this, you can also be the bad guy because as a company, see, a lot of people don't realize that I'm doing this by myself. So in my eyes, I'm just by myself, right? I'm just another guy helping people out. But when somebody is like, let's say they have a change of heart or something, well, they're like, well, you're a company, you can fix this, you can absorb it, Amazon mentality, just give me my money back.
Yeah, it's not that easy.
And you're just like, I don't have that money. And you're like, okay, so that means I have to work extra hard this whole weekend to make up for that. And so it was just like a direct blow. So it's like, oh man. So as a business owner, and it's not just my business, it's not just, engineering or CAD. It has nothing to do with that. This goes for all small business. It doesn't matter if you're selling cupcakes or if you're selling, t-shirts or if you're doing machining or dynos. We all feel that same pain. And I think that's one of the coolest things I've ever got from having a business is I've had other friends that are now business owners and they've started their journey and I've been at their shop when both of us are having a horrible day and we'll just sit there and I'll hear his story and I can totally like just feel for him and then I tell him mine and we just like sit there sad
Feeling sorry for each other.
yeah, for a whole 1 minute, and then we go, okay, well, let's get back to it, and then we just go back our own different ways, and we just say, okay, it's funny, but it doesn't matter, you just get through every day. You have to put your feelings aside and just get back to it.
Yeah, I think it's really important in business to not sort of let it get you down because, yeah, there's always going to be challenges that come along. As you mentioned, usually something that's going to come along at the absolute worst time. But if you kind of let that really affect you and get you down, it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and everything becomes too hard. So I think trying to stay positive, always easier said than done, but trying to stay positive is really important.
Yeah, the first year was also like I was taking on everything that I knew I could do, but that was also the wrong way of approaching things, which I didn't know it in hindsight, obviously. But I started realizing as business went on that there actually isn't things that I thought I was good at that I'm actually not good at. And so that was the growth of the first year and a half in business was basically filtering out the things that I was failing at, right? And then learning to say no to help everybody else out.
It's so hard.
Yeah, because in the beginning well, two things. You want to help everybody, which you have good intentions all the time, right? And then the second is you obviously need to bring in money. So you want to make sure like you have no clients and now you're trying to bring in clients. So you always want to say yes, you feel like. And then you get in the habit of saying yes. Somebody comes in and they tell you their story and what they want to get done. And you're just like, yeah, okay, I can just help you out. But then if you don't actually fulfill that project, then it's like, hey, what's going on with this, whatever. So then it becomes like kind of more of a sour feeling. And you put yourself in a position by saying yes and not actually looking back, say like, okay, do I actually have time for this? And, with everything going on day in and day out, it's easy to lose track if you can actually fulfill those jobs that you're committing to. So that was a big learning curve for me because I'm a big yes guy. It is learning to say no because it's better for everybody if you're just straight up and say like, hey, like, you know what? I would love to do it, but like this is actually what's on my schedule. And if we got to do this, then this is realistic time frame. And then the thing I've learned is a lot of people are very understanding of that and they're more than accepting to wait a little bit longer and give you a little bit more time and stuff like that. So then I was like, oh, wow, I can actually say no and it helps everybody. So that was another thing.
I think your story mirrors so much of my business starting that. You kind of got bills to pay, you're hungry for jobs, so you literally end up saying yes to everything. And that does end up hurting you. And I think that is a skill no matter almost what business you're in. It's almost as important what you say no to as it is what you say yes to.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of moving from that sort of one-off rapid prototyping mentality to getting into the production run, so where did you transition to that and how's that worked out? Because I mean, I guess it's a no-brainer when you're starting to get production scale, you start getting those economies of scale, and that's where you can start actually making some really good money, I assume.
Yeah, so I think I was fortunate. Like, obviously you deal with a lot of, like, for me, I was dealing with a lot of rapid prototype stuff, but in between those jobs and a bunch of CAD stuff like that, I did get a lot of jobs that had very high volume and was able to make really good money on. I had like four different customers that were really giving me high volume stuff where I was actually getting people to come in on the weekends and help, it's like night shift and stuff like this. And we were making really good money, like middle to end of the first year, and it was super good. And then I had a few different connections in the aerospace industry that really helped capital wise to build up enough capital to take the next step, which is all what that was always the plan, is to do a product line. But yeah, it takes a lot of capital, and like I said, fortunately I had the customer base where we were doing really good jobs in machining. And we have like two or three different aerospace companies that we have contracts with, and we're doing work for them. A lot of it is prototype work, but it's high volume prototype work. It's not items that are being used or anything like that. It's mostly like test fitting items. So it's kind of like bottom feeding from the aerospace industry, because I can't take on any big jobs from them right now because I don't have all the resources to do that. So I kind of do like their like nit and gritty work that, just, oh, hey, can you do this really quick? But it's all like prototype stuff. It's not stuff that's being used. But yeah, I mean, fortunately, I have enough of those contracts and those pay really well. They're not guaranteed all the time, but when they do come in, they bring in a lot of capital. And so I use, after the first year and a half, I had pretty much built up my tool library, like I talked about, to the point where I didn't really have to spend thousands of dollars a week on tools anymore. And then that started going towards putting money together to start buying material for my product and stuff like that. So instead of buying tools, I started buying aluminum. And that's pretty much how I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And as far as getting into the industry and the off-road industry, a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had countless inquiries about making things. And so I was like, I love cars, I love trucks, I love motorcycles, I love anything on wheels. And I have a passion for all of it, but the biggest thing I have passion for is suspension in general. I love suspension. I've always loved suspension since I was a kid. I would draw like a two-dimensional back view of an F1 car just because I like the kinetics and the arms and the push rods and all of the cantilever suspension and the wings and like just the back views. I would draw all sorts of suspension parts. It didn't matter what car, a motorcycle, a truck. I would just draw suspension. So I was fortunate to where,
It's natural that was the way you sort of gravitated towards making these parts.
yeah, well, like if you enjoy it, you're just gonna. It's a lot easier to take care of it, right? When I started getting inquiries, I was like, okay, well, I think I'm just going to stick with this and just go for it.
I just wanted to take a moment out of our chat with Matt and talk about a course that's really relevant to this particular episode, which is our 3D modeling in CAD for motorsport course. Normally valued at $199 US, you can use the coupon code M26ENG50, that's M26ENG50, and that'll get you $50 off the purchase price, bringing it down to just $149 US. This course is going to be perfect for anyone who wants to learn more about 3D modeling in CAD. We start with what CAD is and the various software available. We jump into some of the design fundamentals, because when you are designing parts, it does help if you have a basic understanding of engineering principles. We talk about some of the basics of solid modeling, such as datums, 2D and 3D sketching, extrudes and holes, revolves, sweeps and piping, as well as lofts. Next, we move into sheet metal modeling basics, converting to sheet metal, we cover bends, fingers, flat patterns, and bend back. We then move into assemblies, covering the basics of assemblies as well as assembled joints and constraints. We also cover analysis such as geometry measurements and maths, analysis tools and motion, and contact analysis of assemblies. Next, we move into post-processing such as drawing fundamentals and setup, part drawing views, dimensions, and tolerances, just to name a few. We'll then cover some of the more advanced topics in CAD such as surface modeling, simulation and FEA, generative design, and automated modeling. We also include 3D scanning and printing, which is really now almost part and parcel with 3D modeling and CAD. We've broken the entire CAD design process down into a simple 5-step process that you can apply irrespective of the part that you are personally wanting to model. This includes planning, modeling, analysis, prototyping, and then post-processing. This course also includes a library of worked examples where you can watch that 5-step process being applied on a variety of real-world jobs. So remember, the course is normally valued at $199 US. Use the coupon code M26ENG50. That will get you $50 off, bringing it down to just $149 US. You are still protected by our 60-day no questions asked money back guarantee, and you can break that payment down into as many as 8 weekly payments at the checkout. You'll find a link to the course as well as the coupon code in the show notes. Let's get back to our chat now. So with the products that you're producing now under your own banner, how have you decided on specifically which vehicles to support? Has this been sort of inquiry driven, or are you deciding what models to support?
Yeah, so I just looked at which vehicle I liked the most. I'm a big fan of the Ford Raptor. I like a lot of off-road trucks. I like a lot of the Silverados and the Chevys and stuff like that. But for me, it was like looking at the Raptor. I think that's one of the trucks that's used the most for actually going off-road out of the box, right? You can buy this truck and you can just go have fun with it. And it's a good-looking truck. It looks nice on the road. There's so many of these Raptors that just look the part that are so nice. Like Brad DeBerti, like I think that was one of the first ones I was over the top on. It's like matte black, second gen Raptor on 39s and like project tires, and it was like super wide and just like sinister looking. And I was like, man, that is something I can see myself driving in all the time. This is such a badass truck. So I was like, the Raptors were definitely like the number one on my list. I was like, I want to get involved with those. And then as I started kind of introducing those parts, I had a lot of inquiries of the other Raptor applications like the Ranger Raptor and the Bronco Raptor. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to start doing stuff for that too then, and I was like, well, maybe we'll just focus on the Raptors. But since a lot of the new generation applications, like the trucks, like the new Tacomas and the new Tundras, they're like, don't leave us out, we want this stuff. So I'm just like, okay, we'll just make that happen too. And so I'm like, all right, if we can make these parts consistently nice across the board, I would say that the trucks that I'm aiming for, generally speaking, are probably the nicer trucks that you would go to the dealership and buy 40, 50K plus, which I might be wrong, but maybe all trucks are about 40, 50K these days, but maybe 60K, I don't know. But the nicer, newer trucks that we can put some nice stuff on there that need nice parts to complement the nice trucks that are coming out.
I think when you're looking at that sort of market as well, it's a case of where you've got a truck with a higher price point. Obviously, you've got a customer that's probably a little bit more financially able to then spend more money on these aftermarket components as well. So I think the two go hand in hand. You start looking at supporting cheaper models, well, that's going to attract a sort of a customer that's probably not that well funded to go and start modifying the truck as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess a part of you, thinks like, well, it's a really expensive truck, so they should be able to afford some nice parts. But I don't really care too much about having this really crazy price point. Like I like to be as realistic as possible. Like if I was to go buy a part, I don't want to pay these outrageous prices for things. Like, so I'm trying to reason with people because I haven't been in business forever. I feel like a consumer still. And so I'm like, would I buy this for this? No. So I'm not going to sell it for that, right? So then what it ends up being is me sitting on the computer making spreadsheets and actually putting down the cost of every single nut, bolt, box, every single thing, and saying like, okay, well, these are our margins, and how much of that can we give back to the customer so that he doesn't have to break his legs to get these parts and enjoy them. So I'm extremely cautious about being too crazy on price points. I want it to be that people can afford it, not because they have a fancy truck or they make a lot of money or anything like that. So I'm super conscious about price points and quality, and also how we deliver the parts, because I think we had mentioned the box thing, right? I think it's super important. Like, I've gotten stuff in the mail. It's not just an aesthetic, it's how is this person going to receive this package?
And it's sort of, I think Apple are probably one of the consumer brands that do such a good job with the packaging. So you get a new MacBook or a new iPhone, and it's kind of an experience that makes you feel good as you're opening it.
Yeah, people collect boxes. They collect the Apple boxes. I know.
Yeah, for sure. I got dozens of the things. I don't know why I've still got them sitting on the top of the wardrobe. They probably need to be thrown out, but we do. We keep them.
But yeah, and our boxes aren't as nice as I want them to be just yet. Now the foaming is all dialed in now, but I dread having like a customer receive his package and half the arm, whether it's an upper arm or a trailing arm, sticking outside of the box, just damaged. I don't want to deal with that. I'd rather spend a little bit more money and make sure that it's getting there in the exact condition that I sent it out in. And that's super important. And yeah, it's not easy to do that. It's months of development to figure out these processes to make this happen, because I'm still kind of like a one man band. I have one employee, but he's so busy on the machines, just running the machines, and we have 4 machines. We have pallets of material that need to be gone through. I can't have him focusing on that, so I have to take on that title. And in the beginning days, it's like I'll just call a box supplier and say like, hey, this is my product, and can you put it in a box for me with foam? It's not that easy, because then they come back at you, and then you're a week or 2 weeks in with the engineer for the boxes, and they're like, we're going to use this foam, and they want to talk to you about the science of the foam, and you're like, I don't really care, is it going to work? Then they come in with a prototype box, and they're like, showing you examples, and you're just like, oh man, this is taking a lot of time. And then finally, when you get through 2 weeks of that, they go, okay, cool, you need a minimum of 250 to start the order. And you're like, I don't even have enough space to store 250 units of foam. That's going to take my whole office. I need to go look for a storage unit. And then the storage unit is these days basically $400 a month. So you're like, that's the cost of the foam to just store the foam. So that doesn't make sense. So I was like, none of this is going to work. That was the first month and a half of trying to make foam boxes. And then I was like, this is not going to work. So yeah.
Wow. So I think these are the things people take for granted. Someone buys one of your products, it comes in a nice box. It's appreciated. They like that, but nothing's thought about of what the journey looked like to get that into their hands. And every single part of this journey, as we're finding out, is complicated.
It is complicated, yeah, and it takes time. And it's a slow process to figure these little things out.
In terms of the production parts that you're making, what's the size of a run look like? I assume it probably varies depending on the specifics of the product, but you sort of punching out 10 of these, 20 of these, or 100 of these at a time?
Yeah, our volume is still fairly low. So we're doing about 15 complete kits of everything every a couple times a week. So like we try to focus on 2 products per week, and we try to do 15 units of each product every week.
Okay, so on that basis, how do you sort of make the call as to whether it's more efficient to run just one product for the entire week and make 30, and then change and do the same for the other product the following week? What I'm getting at is, obviously, I'm assuming, I'm not a CNC machinist, I'm assuming there's a reasonable amount of sort of downtime and changing over and setting up for a different product.
Yeah, totally. You lose money if you have to break down the machine. It's always better to do higher volume. The problem is I'm not rich enough to do that. So yeah, it has to do with financials.
So it just comes down to how to deploy your capital in the smartest way.
Yeah, because especially when you have like 15 different products or 10 different products, or like right now we only have roughly 5 products released, but we're going to be releasing another 6 in the next 3 weeks. So we're like pushing back and forth on a lot of things, almost like prototyping. The only difference is once we're done building our product, we have all the processing that's all figured out. We have the programs that are done. So switching back and forth between fixturing that we are developing for fast switch and changeovers. Once we develop all of those items, we have a lot of tools that stay stationary in the machines and dedicated pockets. So we're not switching tools out and recalibrating. And we're trying to make it as efficient to go back and forth through all the machines, including buying the same tools for every machine and keeping them equipped with those tools. So it's easy to go back and forth. And then as we design the parts, we want to make sure that the tools that are in the machine are able to machine those parts. We also have, I'm having custom tools ground from our tool maker to make sure that we're not wasting a lot of time on like excessive surfacing. So we have, large like end mills that are ground down to do very big chamfers because a lot of our parts have pretty deep like chamfered edges or like draft angles in some cases. And we kind of implement both designs. We do a lot of like step over machining, which is like contouring, and then also a lot of large chamfers that are just two-dimensional contours that kind of push in and out of the part to kind of change the shape. But overall, it just mostly has to do with keeping the same tools in the machine. We have to just double up and hustle up to make sure it happens. It's not the most efficient way, it's not the best way financially, but we just are forging ahead and just pushing through what it takes to make it happen. That's the only thing that matters right now is making sure that we can get everything out.
Can you get to a point with the products that you're making and the machines that you've got where these can run essentially 24/7 unmanned, or is it just not quite that simple?
100% it can be. I think a lot of products can be ran 100% with automation for sure. That's the future. That's really the only way to do it if you're going to do it. And the only thing that's holding any company back from doing that is volume. And that's basically you have to just invest the money into volume. And that's the other thing is I didn't get any money from any of my customers to start this product. I pulled money out of my profits to buy all the material to fund my own product with no guarantee that anybody was going to buy it. So I didn't have like people just giving me deposits or anything like this. I was like, no, like if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. And if we sell them, then great. If we don't, then that's just the name of the game, right? You're just not going to sell them and you're going to move on from that.
I think you've sort of, yeah, you could probably look at what's available in the market at the moment and sort of see a pretty clear path of what the popular parts are. So, I mean, yes, it is a leap of faith, but, I think it's probably also, and I'm guessing has proven out to be a pretty good leap as well. I mean, on that note as well, just talking about competitors' products, what is it, obviously this sort of aftermarket suspension componentry for this big truck market is fairly mature. There's a few players out there in the market. What is it that you think sort of sets M26 engineering apart from the competitors?
Yeah, there's a little bit of saturation in the market with the items, but at the same time, I feel like there's enough to go around for sure. There's enough for everybody to go around. I think it comes down to our customer service and our attention to detail. And then I get a lot of compliments from my designs. The designs that I put out, they're not just pushed out overnight. As much as I'd love to say like new truck is out, we'll have something out on Monday. That's not how it works. A lot of the parts that I make, I put a lot of thought process in the aesthetic of the part. I want it to look the nicest it's going to be. I want it to complement the truck. I don't want it to be just some colored part that just thrown on there and has some Heims, something like this. I want it to be something that is really just going to look super nice, that you're super happy about showing off and like you want to touch and like, show your friends how every little angle's on there and stuff like that and the attention to detail. So the quality of the parts, the aesthetic of the parts for sure. The other thing that I kind of pride myself a little bit on these days is I pay attention a lot to my customers and my dealers, which we have a few dealers set up now. But a lot of them have very valuable input because you might have the idea of like, oh, I'm just going to make a certain part this way because that's just what the industry is doing, right? But then you get a lot of pushback from the customers like, hey, I know this company and this company are doing it this certain way, but I really wish it could do it this way. And, we take all of that into consideration. So when we hear something from a customer more than once, then it's something that we try to either implement as an option or we just change direction, regardless of what the industry is doing, to make sure that the customers are getting what they want. And a lot of that does have to do with like hardware, as an example. Like some people want whatever you sell, it's fine with them. But then some people are like, hey, like I don't really want uniballs on my suspension. I'd rather have like a urethane or like a Delrin or something else that's like less maintenance or something like this. And so we're like, okay, well, how can we implement that information onto this? And so like now we're doing like hybrid systems where, the front suspension of some of the front suspensions has the option for something like a polyurethane, but we keep the bearings in the back so that way the suspension can articulate without having any binding. And so these are some of the things that some of the customers have brought to our attention, and we're just like, okay, we're going to make sure that this is taken care of the correct way.
Do you think there's a benefit there in the fact that you are still a small company to pivot on an idea like that quicker than maybe a larger company making similar parts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the larger companies might say, well, this is how we're going to engineer it. We know how to do it. So this is what you're going to get.
Yeah. If you don't like it, buy something else.
Maybe so, yeah. But I think if you pay attention to what everybody is talking about out there, I think there's a lot to gain from that information, because there's a lot of cases where the engineers want to do certain things, and then it just nobody likes the engineers at the end of the day, because they're just like, why would they do this? Look at all the German cars where the alternators are like underneath the intake or something like this. Yeah, it might be efficient for weight, but nobody wants to change that thing out, right?
Yeah, I think trying to, and I've built myself into enough corners doing things wrong and then finding out later that whatever you've made is an absolute pain in the ass to work on. And you only do that so many times before you start really thinking about the entirety of the product, a more holistic approach to it than just here's a part, it'll do the job, but there's some downsides. I think that's something that you really appreciate once you start working on cars a little bit.
Yeah, and being that we are a little bit smaller, the other thing too is that I'm also pretty happy with. I don't know how long I can keep it up with, actually, but every customer that buys anything from us, like it's like I communicate with them all the time, whether it's on social media, whether it's via emails or stuff like that. If somebody calls or messages me in regards to their order or whatever, I'm always there to like answer their questions or anything like that, because at the end of the day, if you're not there to help somebody, then it's really hard to make a valid point of what you're selling or what you're making, because like I believe in everything that I'm making, and so there's no reason why I can't be there to help and improve vehicles. So that's super important.
I think that's really important and quite admirable in the early days where you are now. I mean, I would judge you're probably going to get to a point where the company's grown to a stage where that's simply no longer feasible, and you're probably going to need, someone servicing customer service alone. But I think getting that direct feedback in the early days from customers, as opposed to having that sort of isolated or insulated from you via an employee, lets you really understand things that people are liking about the product, just as importantly things that maybe could be improved.
Right, yeah. Or either implementing it as a culture in the company too, because if you can convey that message to the people that are helping you in the business, then they can follow your lead and also be the people that can be leaned on to by the customers a little bit. So I think it's a cultural thing too.
Oh, definitely. We have a Slack channel for customer feedback. So our two customer service guys will post comments, both good and bad, from customers. That has visibility to the entire staff. And that allows us to sort of see where we could do better, or maybe what we're doing really well. I'm guessing from what you've said so far that you are selling both business to business. You mentioned a dealer network as well as direct to consumer. Interested on your sort of take at this point, pros and cons of both models?
I mean, I've seen it in large scales at other companies I've worked at. There's definitely some things that I dislike and like about, having dealers or distributors and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, as long as you don't bite off too much, well, more than you can chew, then all of it's okay. I'm not at any stage in this business to be able to take on big companies like Summit or Jags, or, like these big companies that want to inventory, 50 of this and 100 of that. I would never sign up for any of that because I can't support any of that. If somebody were to say I want 50 units of something tomorrow, I would say probably no, because we don't have that foundation yet. But we do have the foundation to support, like truck shops that are installing kits, local shops that are working on trucks, small city stuff, and then working with customers directly. So we're in a good place to be helping every one of those people. And we do as much as we can. So we talk to them, see what makes sense for the companies. We've definitely gone a lot further with setting up accounts with dealers that make a lot more sense for them and for us. and then kind of just go from there. We don't require a whole lot for that, just like business license, stuff like that. And then we talked to them. But I had a really good time this last weekend. We went to Fiesta Island pre-runner meet, and I met with one of our dealers, Baja HQ, near the San Diego area. Man, I had a great time with those guys. They were just so much fun. They're selling our product now. They have a few trucks that are getting some products on their trucks. They're super stoked about it. But man, we had a good time. They had some beautiful trucks. I have a nice truck, but that's about it. When I saw their trucks, I was like, holy crap! I cannot wait to start cutting my truck apart and start doing cool stuff to it. Cause like,
It's a slippery slope.
yeah, Raptors are fun, but man, when they're like done right with big tires, nice suspension, fiberglass, like all this stuff, oh man, they have some presence. And when you're driving with like 9 of these trucks and yours is like a little bit nicer than
Makes a bit of a statement.
yeah, I was just like, man, I need to get with it already. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. It was super fun hanging out with them, and a lot of my dealers are very similar to this dealer, where they're like, they're very involved with what they're doing. Most of the guys that work there have a really nice truck, not like a mall crawling truck, but like a really really nice truck, and they're out there. One of the trucks that is getting our items on there is like a second generation Raptor with a third generation frame. Rob over at Baja HQ, and he's taking all our suspension stuff over to Mexico, and he's going to be spending a few days out there just testing and tuning and making sure everything's fun. So all of that is super exciting.
In terms of the sort of life cycle of a product from when you first come up with the idea through to being able to actually sell it to a customer and install it on a truck, can you kind of give us a quick overview of how that goes? Sort of, I guess essentially you said earlier that product development has been your sort of key skill set, even though we sort of think of you as a machinist and 3D CAD guy. How does product development work, and how do you apply it to a product?
The first products were the most challenging and the most time consuming. They took 5 months to produce, roughly, just in design process, not even machining, because the first items were the items that were going to set the standard for our aesthetics for all the products going forward. Also, it's like the recipe, right? These are the bushings we're going to be using, the hardware, the colors, the anodizing, the packaging, whatever it might be. So the first products that we made took over 5 months to develop, just CAD design. And there was a number of items. I would 3D print 10 scale version of everything, and it would sit on my desk, and I'd come in every morning and I'd either throw it in the trash or put it in the maybe file. And then, yeah, so that took a very long process. But that has to do a lot more with the aesthetic that you're going to be using across the board. So whatever you go with, you're going to stick with, and you want to make sure that you're very consistent with what you're selling. You want to make sure that whatever design you go with is going to be able to be implemented in other parts that might be shorter, longer, and stuff like this.
So essentially, all of your parts are going to have a family resemblance, no matter what model of truck it's going on, essentially.
Yeah, so that was the longest one. After that, it's a lot faster, because then we can just get a truck in. We have our scanner, so we use a Creaform Go Scan, exclamation mark, I think it's what they put at the end. But it's a really nice scanner. Rob over at Bending, I think it's Cage Kits, Rob Parsons, he's been using that scanner for years. He let me borrow his for a little while when I was at Kibbetech, and then I eventually was able to save up enough to get that scanner, I think, end of last year. Before that, I had the Peel 3D scanner. But yeah, the Creaform Go Scan is a great scanner, and we use that scanner like 3 or 4 times a week. We are using that thing all the time. So we can get a truck in, we could scan all the information, we could tear it apart. It takes us about a day to reverse engineer, put everything in the computer. Then after that, we just implement our style. We cycle everything, make sure everything clears. Look where there might be some areas of improvement, whether it's ground clearance. And then we also do, once we put it in the computer, we'll actually remanufacture the original part with the original material. We'll do some stress testing on the original part to see what kind of load and strain it could take. And then we parallel engineer a counterpart made out of aluminum and try to gain a little bit more strength. Generally speaking, our parts are a little bit heavier than the counterparts, because a lot of these manufacturers are using very, very thin sheet metal, which is fine. But when you put bearings and a little bit more rigid mounting points, then they're going to be a little more prone to stress. So we try to implement at least a 150 to 200% of safety factor to all of the products to make sure that they're going to be more than enough sufficient to handle that extra strain.
So just so I'm understanding this right, you're kind of benchmarking the original component and using that as your sort of understanding of what the original part could handle, and then you're building your parts to be stronger than that.
Correct. Yeah.
Are you doing that stress testing in-house, or are you sort of outsourcing that?
No, we do it in-house. We use Autodesk Inventor for that. So they have some stress analytics that you could use, some tools, and then you can just pretty much, there's all sorts of things you could do. You could apply, pin constraints, general constraints. You put fixed pins, fixed locations, connect surfaces, and then we look at the suspension, what parts are being used, how they're being used. A good example would be like an upper link on a four-link system. They're going to have a lot of tensile load on them. So they're being pulled apart because the axle is wanting to rotate back. Under acceleration, the tire is moving forward, so they're always being pulled apart. And they also have they have more strain in some cases than the lower arms on like the Raptor's 5-link suspension, where there is no coilover mounted to any of these links. They're just kind of all connected. And a lot of the times the upper link has a little bit more strain than the lower link even. So all of those things we take into account. We'll pull and push them, and then sometimes we'll do some torsional testing, but not too often. And a lot of the times it's not very hard to hit those benchmarks anyways. Usually our initial designs are like 350% safety factor. So we actually have more trouble finding ways to pull weight out in the right areas than anything, because generally speaking, it's way overkill anyway. So we're just trying to do our best to get them light enough to where, they're not, overly crazy heavy or anything like this.
Sure. That kind of leads me to another question here, which is liability. And obviously in the US, it seems from the outside looking in that everyone loves to sue everyone else when anything goes wrong. And is this a concern for you?
No, we have liability insurance. We also have a kind of a disclaimer with our products. All of our products, even though they're used on the street, we recommend them for off-road, obviously, for that liability reason. But in those cases, we do have liability insurance. Obviously, like I think if you have a product, that's just standard procedure in the U.S. You have to have all your bases covered. I spend a lot of money on insurance. I don't even know. I spend a lot of money for the company to be insured. Obviously, we have alarm systems and cameras and all this other stuff. My insurance has to cover for earthquakes and fire for the machines. My machines need their own insurance because they're being financed. Obviously, you have vehicle insurance, you have your life insurance, you have your healthcare insurance. So the list goes on of insurance. So that just gets thrown into the pile of insurances for just general items.
Yeah, it'd probably be nice not to have concern about that hanging over your head, though.
Yeah, but I mean, we do our best. The other thing too is we test a lot of our products a lot. So, I think like my Raptor, we put 24,000 miles, almost 50,000 kilometers in 1 year, just testing it.
So it's actual real world testing as opposed to just validation in the virtual world.
Yeah, and then all the trucks that we develop parts on, I sponsor trucks. So like if a customer says, hey, or I'll reach out to certain people that I'm interested in sponsoring, that those sponsorships go on through development. So like when they sign on as a sponsorship, it's the vehicle is being used for development as well. So they're going out with us, they're testing it with us. So everything is completely tested through. We don't just do it because it fits, it's good to go. We will actually take each vehicle out. So if we make it, that means we have a sponsored vehicle for that application. So we actually have my Raptor, which is a 2023 Raptor V6 twin turbo. Obviously, it's a business vehicle, so it's like our shop mule, right? That thing's been taken apart so many times and driven everywhere, I feel like. But we also have a Raptor R with a V8 supercharged 24 model. We also have a Bronco Raptor. We have a new Tundra that we're sponsoring. We have a new Raptor Ranger that we're sponsoring. So these vehicles that we sponsor, they not only promote the product, but they also are test mules. So people that are using their vehicles.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, 2 years in, everything's obviously going in the right trajectory. I mean, what do you sort of have in mind for what this business is going to look like in 5 years? Are you sort of double the size, 10 staff, 100 product lines? more of what you're doing now? Yeah, give us your look into your crystal ball and let us know what you see.
Continuing on this path for sure. I want a lot of products in the product line that makes sense. So we're going to be continuing to make more things for trucks and suspension parts as well as fabricated parts. So we're going to be doing a little bit of bumpers and stuff like recovery cages for the back and stuff that we can use. I have a vision of being able to, go on 3 kind of trail trips a year minimum, or maybe quarterly trail trips where we can actually take the trucks out more frequently to longer trips like Mexico and stuff like this, and getting more involved with just those longer trips, 3 or 4 days at a time, and really testing everything that we're making a lot more just than just going on local trails and stuff like that. And definitely get more staff in here that's interested in and joining in on this journey. I think it's a fun journey. I try to keep it as fun and lively as I can. I'm not too serious when it comes to like being corporate or anything like that. I don't really care about that stuff. I just want to make sure everybody's having a good time. And I don't know, like it just I've worked my whole life. This is like my first time just doing this, and yeah, it's gonna be a little stressful, but overall, I'm just trying to have a good time and make everybody that's here have a good time with me and enjoy the process. But yeah, we're going to be doing that. So yeah, I mean, I guess continuing the product line, going on more trips. We are going to, I have a 74 F100. We're going to be doing a tube chassis for that. So that's going to be on social media quite a bit in November, middle October, late November. We're going to get back into doing a fully tube chassis vehicle just to showcase how much fun we can have for the most part. And if people want them, then that truck will be available too. And that'll be a full tube chassis, 74 F100. It's like an extended cab is what it looks like. And then in the year or two to come, I have plans on opening another company that's going back to just doing machining. And that will be kind of like a departure from this company. And it's mostly just to take bigger leaps in the aerospace and military industry.
Okay, so you'll be doing production runs for those industries more.
It'll be more aerospace and military based company machining with all the necessary certificates to actually take on bigger jobs. As much as I'd love to do that at this business, I really can't, because the amount of credentials that you need to take on these big jobs would actually stunt the growth of M26. It requires way more paperwork and way more information and staff that just does paperwork and stuff like this. And so it doesn't make any sense to bring that company in with this one. But there's a lot of things to benefit from a company like that. So we will probably start that journey end of next year and go back into just machining, and maybe we could take on general machining for customers as well. But with this company, M26, we're going to be mostly focused on our product line, off-road, anything that we could contribute to this industry, which is a lot, I feel like. Try to go out there and have fun with all the other companies that are having fun and enjoy everything that has to do with that.
So 2 follow-up questions that have come out of that. The first is, how are you sort of tracking with the size of your facility? Is that going to sort of be sufficient for the next 5 years to allow your growth, or are you going to have to look at upsizing?
So I have no room left. I'm done. That's it.
Well, that's what I was sort of thinking from your Instagram. It looks like you've kind of filled that space out pretty thoroughly already.
Mm-hmm. We'd be expanded already if we had the space available, but it's hard to find space right now. So we will be expanding first of the year for sure, probably double the space at least, because one, our electrical is maxed out. So the 4 machines, the welders, the bandsaw, the air compressor, all of that has maxed out our electrical in our building. Our physical space is maxed out. We're going taller on the sides, taller racks. We're trying to go up instead of, there's not very much space left. And now that we're going to be starting fabrication of our F100 in a few months, that's going to require more fabrication. And I also want to have a 5-axis in this facility in the next year. So the space is far from okay, so we have to definitely expand. Probably first of the year we'll be expanding.
That's pretty typical growing pains, though. I mean, it's always a difficult decision when you're looking at space, because you don't know what you don't know. How big is the business going to be? How much room am I going to need? And of course, you don't want a space that's too small that you're going to immediately grow out of, but likewise, you don't want to just be needlessly paying rent on a facility that's twice the size that you need and you can't grow into it.
Totally. Yeah, sometimes I miss having just my crates that I had to move from this side of the shop to that side of the shop for a picture because I'm just like, oh, there's so much free space. But yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing. But yeah, we'll definitely be getting some more space. And the idea would be basically to move our small dedicated fabrication area that we currently have to the new facility, which that facility will be mostly for fabrication of our products as well as developmental reasons. So tearing apart trucks, scanning, stuff like this. It'll be any kind of like grinding, abrasive, stuff like this. And then that'll free up space in our current facility to add a 5-axis machine. And so that's the plan. So it's too expensive to actually move machines around. It's very expensive. So
Yeah, I was thinking that can't be a cheap exercise.
no.
Okay, so the other follow-up question with your idea of basically having a second machine shop for this aerospace industry, how are you going to man that or split your own time, given that you've sort of indicated you're already crazy busy on M26?
So it's just kind of continuing the jobs that I'm already doing. Then those jobs might have more leads on jobs that need certification. And so I basically have to deny some of those jobs because, I don't have all the credentials needed to actually fulfill those jobs. So it's mostly just allowing the opportunity of those jobs to kind of come in. And then basically I would just hire staff to run those machines. I would just oversee the management. Obviously, all that will work out if we can get M26 up and running and staffed to where it makes sense, right? I'm not going to go off starting companies if I don't have the ability or the time to do so. But being that I've already done it once, now I understand what it takes, and I can't say that it's easy, but I definitely have a little bit more idea of what I'm getting myself into, and then I can make whatever necessary things or put things in place so that it's not so hard the second go around.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Matt, I think we'll move towards wrapping this up. And as always, we've got the same 3 questions we ask all of our guests. I've already asked these to you in our last episode. So I've changed this up a little bit and more angled it towards the direction of today's conversation. So the first of the questions is, what's the best part about starting and building your own business?
I think it's what everybody talks about. The idea of building your own thing is self-rewarding. It's a personal investment. It takes a lot from you, but I think it's worth it. I think it's fun. It's definitely far from easy, but without a doubt, one of the greatest and best feelings to actually do it. And it definitely makes it really worth it after a while.
After a while.
Stages. It's definitely a lot of second thoughts, but right now I'm super happy. Like, I think it's great. I love it. I think I wish I could have done it sooner, but at the same time, I feel like everything I've ever done in my life was necessary to build up my strength to endure this immense amount of pain that this company has brought me, but also the great fulfillment of love for the company. And now, 2 years in, I'm finally starting to kind of enjoy coming into the shop and saying like, wow, this is actually kind of cool. So it's fun. Like, now I'm having a great time. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of satisfaction that I get out of knowing that our team have built this business that didn't exist before. It's got customers that are incredibly happy with what we're doing, and I think we're also genuinely helping people and making a difference in people's lives. And for me, that's really satisfying too.
Yeah. The impact on people, whether it's customers, friends, family, that's super rewarding when people come up to you and they're happy to like support your whatever ambition or whatever company you're starting, and they're like beside you, and like the friends that you meet with that, the hardship that you share with other business owners, all of it's fun. It's a fun journey. Feels like a movie kind of.
Yeah. Embrace the journey. All right, our second question. If you could go back in time, is there any mistakes you made or anything that you'd do differently?
No, I wouldn't. It's all necessary for sure. Is it ideal? No. but it's what has to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good attitude to that, because obviously things do go wrong. It's inevitable, and quite often you'll sort of think back and I should have done this differently. But at the time, I think you're always making the best decision you can with the information available. And of course, hindsight's always 20/20, so it's easy when you look back. But at the time, I think those mistakes that you make, also you learn so much more from the things that go wrong sometimes than the things that go right. So I agree with you. I think it's a necessary part of the journey.
Yeah, I had a great time for the companies I worked for. I think every company I took so much information from. How, I don't know, I've never really had a bad boss. Every boss has a bad day, I feel like. They all have a bad day, right? But I feel like I picked up positive from all of them. And so I don't know, like, yeah, it's all necessary. It's great to see like the bad and the good from both sides, as an employer and an employee, and also as like being a coworker to some people, and not having money to having a little bit of money to not having money again, and then kind of starting that process over, and it just keeps you grounded. Like, I don't know, you stay busy, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, even if I won the lotto, my friend Joel actually said this at Overkill. He said if I won the lotto, I'd probably just buy more machine, get more in debt, and just start. And I'm like, dude, I would do the same thing. Like, I would probably do the same thing, because like I don't want to just sit in the beach on Hawaii. Like, that doesn't sound appealing to me at all. I get bored beyond my mind. Like, I want to go get machines. I want to start building more stuff, and that's just it. So.
Yeah, 100% agree. I definitely have no ambition to sit on the beach sipping a beer. It's not for me. Maybe for a few days, but definitely not for the remainder of my life. All right, our last question. If people want to follow you, see what you're up to, maybe buy some of your products, how are they best to do so?
Yeah, so the company is M26 Engineering. Our website is m26engineering.com. Our handle on Instagram is at M26Engineering. If you guys want to check out all my CAD stuff that I've pretty much been known for, it's Matt_EIGHT26. So Matt_826. And yeah, that's all the CAD stuff, all the cool videos with all the fancy music and dancing bananas or whatever everybody's doing. So yeah.
As usual, we'll put links to all of those accounts in the show notes to make it easy for people to find. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure catching up and sort of just seeing what's happened over the last 2 years. I mean, I do watch from a distance and follow you on Instagram, and it's always great to see the reels that you're putting out and just see what's been going on. And of course, we wish you all the best for the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andre.
If you enjoyed this episode of Tuned In with Matthew, we'd love it if you could drop a review on your chosen podcasting platform. These reviews really help us to grow our audience, and that in turn helps us to continue to get more high quality guests. To say thanks, each week we'll be picking a random reviewer and sending them out an HPA t-shirt free of charge anywhere in the world. This is also a great place to ask any questions you might have too, and I'll do my best to answer them if your review gets picked. So this week, a big shout out to SUGH from the US, who has said, I listen to this podcast while I work, and it helps me think deeper into the finer points on a subject from a perspective of someone with more experience than me. I appreciate you, Andre, for your ability to interview and build out the concepts for the listeners, and also for the leaders in industry signing up to tell their story. Well, thanks for the kind words there, and if you get in touch with your t-shirt size and shipping details, we'll get a fresh tee shipped straight out to you. All right, that concludes our interview. And before we sign off, I just wanted to mention, for anyone who's been perhaps hiding under a rock and hasn't heard of High Performance Academy before, we are an online training school, and we specialize in teaching a range of performance automotive topics, everything from engine tuning and engine building through to wiring, car suspension and wheel alignment, data analysis, and race driver education. Now remember, you've got that coupon code. You can use podcast75 at the checkout to get $75 off the purchase of your first course. You'll find our full course list at hpacademy.com/courses. Important to mention that when you purchase a course from us, that course is yours for life as well. It never expires. You can rewatch the course as many times as you like, whenever you like. The purchase of a course will also give you 3 months of access to our gold membership. That gives you access to our private members only forum, which which is the perfect place to get answers to your specific questions. You'll also get access to our regular weekly members webinars, which is where we touch on a particular topic in the performance automotive realm. We dive into that topic for about an hour. If you can watch live, you can ask questions and get answers in real time. If the time zones don't work for you, that's fine too. You're going to get access as a gold member to our previous webinar archive. We've got close to 300 hours of existing content in that archive. It is an absolute goldmine. So remember that coupon code podcast75. Check out our course list at hpacademy.com/courses.